welcome. Following the massive success of Watchmen, Alan Moore submitted a crossover event proposal to DC titled Twilight of the Superheroes. Reportedly, this proposal was written and circulated around the DC office sometime in 1987. However, during this time, Alan Moore was quickly becoming disenfranchised with DC. In a nutshell, Moore generally disagreed with their work-for-hire policy. He also openly disagreed with DC enforcing advisory labels on their comics. Overall, Moore felt that despite the highly regarded work he had produced for the company, the corporate overlords were always going to give him the least amount of recognition as possible. Essentially, the ambitious project Moore had proposed stalled and never moved forward, probably due to the aforementioned factors more than anything else. Then in 1989, after finishing the contractually obligated ending to V for Vendetta, Alan Moore left DC. The proposed Twilight of the Superheroes miniseries officially became a dead project. How this proposal managed to become public is a mystery that's not all that mysterious, to be honest. I mean, this was the 80s, and the spoiler culture scene nowadays was so niched then that it was practically non-existent. Basically, there were no precautions taken to ensure it remained in-house, because leaks were neither an issue nor a concern. So while the exact source of the leak is undetermined, it's not all that surprising it occurred. And let's face it, the only reason this document is of any interest at all is because it was written by Alan Moore. Possibly one of the biggest reasons this proposal continues to be of interest to this day is because of the allegation that Mark Waid and Alex Ross used this proposal as the basis for their 1996 miniseries, Kingdom Come. Kingdom Come was both a commercial and critical success when it was released. Furthermore, it was a story that amounted to a superhero apocalypse, which at the time was ironic, since it came at a time when mainstream superhero comics were crashing and burning. There was also the fact that the writer, Mark Waid, who had a prolific career in comics, had not written anything of that caliber previously. Of course, that statement is dependent on one's opinion regarding Waid's career up to that point, and the quality of Kingdom Come itself. Within this context, the rumor suggesting that Kingdom Come was merely a bastardized version of Twilight of the Superheroes sounds quite valid, especially if one is unfamiliar with the source material. But, is it true? Well, let's do the obvious, and take a detailed look at the original Alan Moore proposal, and then compare it to Kingdom Come. First of all, one needs to ask, is the proposal one can find online real? The answer to that question is yes, it is definitely real. Both Alan Moore and DC have confirmed its authenticity. In the past, DC has asserted their copyright to the material. This action further confirms it as authentic, since DC wouldn't make a legal claim to a document that wasn't their intellectual property. With that out of the way, let's move on. The proposal begins with a long introduction, which is mostly concerned about the practical marketing aspects and the logistics of the proposed series. Obviously, there's no need to summarize this part. In the next portion, Moore details the framing sequence of the story. The Time Trapper distorts a 20-year segment of the time stream in order to mess with the Legion of Superheroes. In effect, this distortion prevents time travel to and from the future. Moore's overall intent with this time distortion was to allow for alternate timeline stories. It would be a permanently locked area of DC continuity where there are multiple possible Earths. It's a portion of space-time where all the pre-crisis events could have occurred, or, as another example, it's where the future events of The Dark Knight Returns could occur. For the purposes of Twilight of the Superheroes, the time-trapped Legionnaires and the time traveler Rip Hunter see events that lead to an apocalyptic superhero event. The Legionnaires find a way back to their future time, while Rip Hunter travels back to 1987 to find John Constantine and enlist his help in preventing the apocalyptic future. This is where the actual story starts. Following this, Moore presents the setting in which this apocalyptic future story takes place. The human race has overcome their nihilistic preoccupation with self-destruction, and the world is going through an awkward social and technological transition. By default, the protectors of the human race, superheroes, have inherited the world and have become the royalty that governs the affairs of humanity. These royal families, so to speak, are broken up into 8 different factions. There's the House of Steel, which is the Superman and Wonder Woman family, the House of Thunder, which is the Captain Marvel family, the House of Titans, which is made up of the remaining members of the Teen Titans, the House of Mystery, which is DC's supernatural characters, the House of Secrets, which is primarily made up of supervillains, the House of Justice, which is made up of the remaining members of the Justice League, and the House of Tomorrow, which is made up of time travelers. The final faction, the House of Lanterns, consists of various Lantern Corps members and other alien races that were forced off of the Earth. They are situated on one of the moons of Mars. From there, Moore finally details the actual plot of the story. There is an arranged marriage taking place between the Superman and Captain Marvel families. This will consolidate the two most powerful houses together. Of course, the other houses are very concerned about these two houses joining and becoming the most powerful presence on the planet. Using knowledge he acquired from Rip Hunter, John Constantine begins a complex plot to eradicate the presence of superheroes on the planet. This involves pitting all of the houses against one another in an all-out war on the day of the wedding that will unite the houses of Steel and Marvel. The big reveal late in the story is that Captain Marvel has been dead since the beginning of the series. Captain Marvel is actually the Martian Manhunter who killed Captain Marvel and assumed his place. The Manhunter distracts Superman long enough for the House of Lanterns to invade the Earth and kill Superman. These invading forces are then repelled when Constantine informs them their homeworlds are under attack by another alien force. With the exception of human heroes like Batman and the Shadow, the Earth is free from superpowered beings and aliens. The human race is free to choose its destiny without superhero gods watching over them. For the most part, that's the story and the setting. Yes, I've left out the finer details and just focused on the grand plan. Moore's proposal has a lot of details, many of which would have required editorial approval and refinement. Certain elements and suggested characters would likely have changed, but the overall plot would have stayed roughly the same. First, it needs to be mentioned that Kingdom Come is an Elseworlds story. Unlike Twilight, it doesn't occur in regular DC continuity. This miniseries is its own self-contained thing that has no bearing on any character or title. Or, to paraphrase a popular saying, what happens in Elseworld stays in Elseworld. Kingdom Come begins with the introduction of Norman McKay, a pastor who is recruited by the Spectre to assist him in passing judgment. Through Norman's perspective, we see a world overrun with violent superheroes, most of whom are the children of the previous generation of superheroes. It appears the world is in chaos and at a tipping point in history, and when it reaches that point, the Spectre needs to pass judgment. Superman, who has abandoned society following the death of Lois Lane, is coerced back into action by Wonder Woman. Her argument is that these violent children need his guidance. They need Superman to be the active symbol of truth and justice once again. Superman returns, gathers the heroes together, and imprisons those that don't act in the manner befitting the power they wield. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor plots to destroy all the superpowered people, and Superman in particular. Luthor's goal is to allow the human race to govern itself and to be free of the tyranny of superhumans. This all culminates with one massive battle in the middle of Kansas. While these super people fight, the United Nations authorizes a nuclear strike on the location of this battle. It's here the Spectre asks Norman McKay to pass judgment. Do the heroes deserve to live or die? Norman is unable to decide. Captain Marvel, who has been brainwashed by Luthor to kill Superman, sacrifices himself to prevent this nuclear catastrophe. Unfortunately, a good portion of the superpowered population are also killed, despite Captain Marvel's heroic final effort. Enraged, Superman rushes to the United Nations with the intent to exact revenge on those that ordered the nuclear strike. Before he can do that, Norman McKay appears and talks him down from that murderous ledge. The world is safe again, and possibly heading in a better direction. Objectively speaking, the two stories are vastly different. The only similarity is the underlying plot, which is an engineered war between all the superpowers on the planet, although I don't think one could argue that's a unique concept. Hidden forces manipulating others into destroying themselves is a basic storytelling premise. One could argue that the usage of Captain Marvel in a pivotal role is derivative of the Alan Moore proposal. While the approach to the character is different in both stories, the big red cheese has the same goal: to take out Superman. This plot point is difficult to justify as coincidence. It seems too specific. The overall conclusion, with the human race taking control of their own destiny, is also similar. But in Kingdom Come, this conclusion is very soft, one could say. There are still many superheroes left over, and they exist to teach the younger generation a better way. While in Twilight, the Earth is clear of these individuals. Also, the intent of the two works is rather different. Twilight of the Superheroes would have established a platform that allowed for a wide variety of content. It would have brought back the multiverse, but only for a limited period in DC continuity. Basically, it would have given creators unlimited potential for stories. much like the DC Universe had been prior to Crisis. Also, as Moore points out in his proposal, this crossover would give the DC Universe a conclusion. Citing the example of Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, Moore argues that, ultimately, a conclusion, even an indistinct or open-ended one, elevates a myth into a legend. Ultimately, this is what Twilight could have provided for the entire DC pantheon of heroes: closure and legendary status. Of course, this element would be subtext. For the most part, the intent of Kingdom Come is to acknowledge the state of the comic book industry in 1996. It's grim and gritty, and there's too much senseless violence. Kingdom Come says, there was a time when heroes inspired us to be better, but now, all they inspire is fear. In that respect, it's very nostalgic. It perceives the present as being worse than the past, or, in other words, simpler times are better times. Again, whether one agrees with this sentiment is dependent on one's opinion concerning contemporary society and the chaotic changes that always feel inevitable. However, this is a very surface-level observation. Its accuracy and usefulness is suspect, in my opinion. While I have read that both Mark Waid and the artist Alex Ross, who was responsible for proposing Kingdom Come to DC, have acknowledged they are familiar with the Twilight of the Superheroes proposal, I think the most one can conclude is that Twilight influenced some surface-level elements in Kingdom Come. But to suggest that Kingdom Come is outright plagiarism would not be an accurate statement. In my opinion, the two projects are vastly different in plot, execution, and intent. That's it for today. Like, share, subscribe, and comment, and I will talk at you later. Until next time.